October the 12th, 1987, a dog and 5 Irishmen set sail from Malta in an old, rusty freighter. Their destination, Libya. The dog was a present for the Libyan spy who'd organised their cargo. Enough weapons to fuel the IRA's war against the British for decades to come. In the age of terror, some conflicts feel they may never end. The violence relentless, the combatants irreconcilable.
Never! Never!
Never, never,
Never!
never change.
In 1987, I saw no way out of this never-never land in Northern Ireland. But in the space of 10 days, I watched 2 dramatic events unfold that would prove me wrong. The first was an eye-opening revelation of how rogue states sponsored terrorism. The second was brutal and bloody, a massacre of civilians, the desecration of a day set aside to honour the dead. These events could have driven Northern Ireland into the abyss. Instead, in ways that nobody could have predicted, they would mark a beginning of the long road to peace. On the afternoon of the 30th of October 1987, a French customs patrol spotted a suspicious ship off the coast of Brittany. They suspected it might be running drugs and decided to intercept. The ship was called the Exund, and when they boarded, the French were surprised to discover it had an Irish crew. They were even more surprised by what they found below decks, a booby-trap cargo.
It sinks. She sinks if the charges broke.
And when they found what was in the hold, they were flabbergasted. Around the same time, in a safe house on the lonely border between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic, the IRA was putting the finishing touches to yet another bomb.
I remember growing up in Northern Ireland that you hear a policeman being shot every week or a bomb happening there, and it was and you become very numb to it all. You're just like, oh, there's another killing. Yeah, we just get on with life.
But this bomb was different. Not only would it shatter the lives of those caught in its terrible blast, it would also mark a turning point on the long road to peace. In Brest Harbour, the Exund was giving up its deadly secrets. Not drugs, but a vast arsenal of state-of-the-art weaponry, high explosives, guns, ammunition, and missiles. The French had no idea where they came from or who they were for. In the next 10 days, the mystery of the Exund would unfold, with far-reaching repercussions for Britain's war against the IRA. Meanwhile, in Northern Ireland, an IRA unit was now wrecking a safe route for their bomb through the byways of County Fermanagh. It was no easy task. The winding lanes were heavily patrolled by the British Army. One of its roles was to protect remote Protestant communities from IRA attack.
The IRA strategy was basically to make that part of Fermanagh ungovernable, un-British, a claim of territory.
How would you describe that strategy?
Well, I think in human rights terms, it was a strategy of genocide.
The target for this particular IRA bomb could hardly have been more provocative. The emotionally charged Remembrance Sunday parade in Fermanagh's county town, Enniskillen. Looking through my diaries of the last 30 years, I've watched the IRA build itself into one of the most lethal and resilient insurgent groups in the world. By the 1980s, it had committed volunteers, a disciplined military leadership, and a well-thought-out plan of action. The IRA's strategy was to wage a war of attrition that would finally drive Britain out of the north. They called their strategy the Long War.
We will eventually sap the political will of the British government to remain in Ireland.
But the war would also be fought on another front. The long-term aim was to make the IRA's political wing, Sinn Féin, a dominant force in Irish politics. The strategy was devised by Gerry Adams and his inner circle. One of them was Danny Morrison. 20 years ago, I remember quoting his words that echoed through history. "Who here will object," he said, "if, with the ballot paper in this hand and the Armalite in this hand, we take power in Ireland?" Thus, the course was set. The Long War was to be waged on two fronts, the military and the political. Through the 1980s, I noted Sinn Féin's advances at the ballot box. But Sinn Féin was still very much the junior partner of the IRA.
We don't believe that winning elections and winning any amount of votes will bring freedom in Ireland. At the end of the day, it will be the cutting edge of the IRA which will bring freedom.
Martin McGuinness is now Northern Ireland's Deputy First Minister, but in 1987 his first allegiance was to the IRA. But the IRA leadership knew that the Long War could only last as long as it had the resources to fight it. The British knew this too. Their aim, to strangle the IRA's supply lines of cash and modern weaponry. They never imagined that it could escalate the conflict and carry on fighting indefinitely. Where would the money come from? Who would supply the arms? And how could such an operation be carried out without the intelligence services getting wind of it? The answers were about to be revealed. The skipper of the Exund was now behind bars in the port of Brest. French customs began their interviews. This dramatization is based on transcripts of what he said.
My name is Adrian John Hopkins. I'm a married man with 4 kids and I hold an Irish passport. I'm a manager of several companies which deal in commercial vessels. Now, in this context, a person I've known for some time, namely Henry Cairns, he contacted me about February or March of this year, offered me some business. He told me that he knew of this businessman who wanted to purchase a cargo ship.
That cargo ship was the Exund, now seized and docked in Brest Harbour. Adrian Hopkins already had a colourful history with the Irish police. He'd once owned a horse-drawn tourist business. But the wheels came off that venture when its offices mysteriously went up in flames. He then set up a travel agency. It went bust, leaving customers high and dry. His financial difficulties grew, and by the mid-80s he'd grasped a potential lifebelt, buying, selling and delivering boats. But the Exund had scuppered him. Hopkins was the only one of the 5 Irishmen to spill the beans. He explained how he'd bought the Exund and delivered it to Malta, to a man called Henry Cairns.
In Malta, I met Cairns and 3 men of the crew in a hotel room, but there was no captain. They said he wasn't available and asked if I would take his place, so I agreed. 2 hours out to sea, one of the men, James Boyle, came to me and said that he and his colleagues were members of the Provisional IRA. Boyle made me 2 offers. One, that I would be very well paid, and that the other was my family would be safe. I took that as a physical threat to my family.
Meanwhile, in County Fermanagh, the IRA continued preparations for one of the most notorious attacks of its long war. They were moving ever closer to their highly sensitive target, the Remembrance Sunday parade in Enniskillen. For the town's Protestant community, Remembrance Sunday was a special day, with special family memories.
When I was very young, my father attended Remembrance Sunday every year. He lost his leg in the First World War, and Remembrance Day was very important to him.
The regiments then raised in Ulster suffered staggering losses. 2,000 were lost on the first day of the Battle of the Somme. But for men like Samuel Galt, who'd served in the Royal Ulster Constabulary, the emotional power of Remembrance Sunday was not confined to the past.
It was nearly a family pilgrimage. Most years I remember going to the Remembrance Day parade. It was just like a commemoration, not just for the World Wars, but actually to commemorate the maybe colleagues of my father that were murdered during the Troubles.
In France, on the first day of his interrogation, Adrian Hopkins gave his interrogators a surprising piece of information. He revealed where his IRA customers had told him to take the Exund.
Boyle came to me and said that they were on a mission, namely to go to Libya.
The oil-rich sands of Libya were the home of the Osama bin Laden of the day, the man President Ronald Reagan called the mad dog of the Middle East, Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. Gaddafi was using his petrodollars to fuel revolutionary terrorism around the world, and the IRA was one of his favorite customers. The relationship stretched way back to the 1970s. Gaddafi made no secret of his support for the IRA's so-called liberation struggle.
We believe they have just cause, because Irish is Irish and Britain is Britain. We consider the existence of Britain in the north of Irish is a kind of imperialism.
By the mid-80s, Gaddafi's relationship with Britain had hit rock bottom. First, a British police officer, Yvonne Fletcher, was shot dead whilst patrolling a demonstration outside the Libyan embassy in London. The shot came from inside the building. Diplomatic relations were severed. Then, when US warplanes bombed Libya in retaliation for support of terrorism, the F-111s took off from British bases. And now, more than ever, Gaddafi's enemy's enemy became his friend. He had supplied arms to the IRA before, but now began to do so on a massive scale and at no cost whatsoever to the IRA. This was state sponsorship of terrorism of the most calculated and deadly